welcome back to Scarlet Rage Vintage, and to my left is the amazing historian and fashion author, Miss Liz Tregenza. Our first couple of videos were so good that I had to bring her back and give us all a lesson on fashion history. And today we're going to actually go back to British fashion, and we're going to talk about CC41. Which is a label, how it started and how you know which year it is. You can go through your vintage collection and you can see if you have any ones.
So the CC41 label, to begin with, this was in use on clothes, properly in use between 1942 and 1952. Actually a really long period.
Yeah.
So CC41 was for utility clothing. There's been so many things about, oh, what did CC41 mean?
Yes.
It didn't mean anything.
Oh, well that's good to know.
It was designed not to mean anything, which is a really strange concept, but in World War II they quite liked it. It looks a bit like Pac-Man, but at the time they used to call it the double cheeses. That was designed by a gentleman called Reginald Shipp. This label, the thing that it was sort of denoting was quality. It was to ensure quality across the board for everyone.
So was it Second World War?
Second World War.
Start in the Second World War?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they came up with the idea in 1941, so that's where the 41 comes from.
Right.
But it wasn't really put into action until 1942. So products were all rationed, but not all garments had to have a utility label in them. So not everything made during the war would have the label.
And this is generally just British fashion?
It's only British, and it couldn't be exported.
Right.
So if you find them somewhere else,
they've been brought over.
If you know, you do see them occasionally come up in America, so it might be like a war bride took it out there with her or something like that.
Okay.
So at the beginning it was like you could have either a printed or a woven label, and it was put in different places in the garment.
Okay.
And it sometimes had sort of a series of numbers on it as well, and the numbers tend to denote what fabric it's made from. Early on you tend to get a manufacturer's label as well.
Okay.
Later in the war you tend not to. The biggest company that was making utility was Marks and Spencer's, so that's St Michael.
St Michael?
You see so much St Michael with a utility label in it. Because it was good quality, that's why it lasts, and that's why you still find so much British wartime stuff with the label in.
Plus you have a lot of, in the UK and American and European, you have a lot of collectors of this label as well.
Absolutely. As well, it's quite an interesting way to think through how companies were having to design clothing, because everything was subject to austerity measures. So austerity measures limited the sort of number of buttons, length, fabrics used, lining. The interesting thing is sometimes you see that people were altering things as well. Like one of the most intriguing things is sort of the beads and the sequins on CC41 stuff that really shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
So that's clearly someone has gone, I'm going to jazz that up a bit. But the thing you find probably the most CC41 is shoes. You find lots and lots of shoes. They survived really, really well. They're really sturdy, they were made to last, they had double soles, generally made from leather.
Oh, right.
Really amazing quality.
Okay. With
the shoes, if they have a peep toe, they have a CC41 stamp in, they will be post 1948. Post-war as well, when they were still using the label. If it has an X on it, that's super utility. So that's like expensive utility.
Okay.
So that's really nice. That's sort of the top end utility pieces.
Because you also get the dinner plate.
The dinner plate is my favourite.
Which actually I have a dinner plate suit.
Oh.
So here is my 1940s, the dinner plate.
This is actually a really nice example, and it's a good one to kind of have. So the dinner plate label, a lot of people have always said, oh, it's CC41. It's not.
Okay.
So that's
it's nothing to do with CC41.
It was still a Board of Trade initiative, but it is not CC41, because what the dinner plate label denotes is it's non-utility.
Right.
So it's the top end, the top pieces that aren't couture, basically. It's the highest end of the ready-to-wear, so what were then called the wholesale couturiers or the model houses would have these labels in. And at the time, it had a really, really bad reception. So this label came out in 1946 and the manufacturers hated it.
Why?
because they thought it was too close to the CC41 label, and they thought that customers were going to think that if they've got this label in them, you know, they're producing utility clothing, but they're producing something much better, and they were like, why have I got to have my clothes stamped as well?
Okay.
So what you actually sometimes find is that clothes with this dinner plate labelling, the label's in really obscure places.
Yeah,
so you see it in like the skirt seams or in the waistband seam, because they've gone, oh, I've got to put that label in, but I don't really want it in there.
Okay.
So it didn't go down very well. It was designed by a guy called Percy Metcalfe. He was told he could pretty much make it however he wanted. He could do any
So he could be the most creative man in the world.
Yeah.
Yet he kept quite similar to the CC41.
Yeah, it's quite funny really. So at the time it was called generally 11011 was the sort of nickname for it, 'cause it's 2 1s in the circle and the 2 1s.
Yes.
Or it was called the hieroglyphic. The British trade press liked to call it the hieroglyphic. Everyone hated it, but it seemed to be in use. It came into use certainly in 1946, and I found dated garments up to 1949 with it. It was expensive stuff new.
Yeah, because what I want to talk to you about is we just discussed obviously with CC41 sequin beading stuff.
Yeah.
It was generally put on afterwards.
Yeah.
This actually does have sequin and beading work.
It's awesome, and you know what? This is, I love this example because it perfectly says something about the times really. So Rosalind Gilbert, which is the person who this is by,
yes,
and this was a company who was affiliated with something called the Guild of British Creative Designers.
Okay.
Now the Guild were known for producing completely over the top, out of the time stuff. So garments that were considered widely bad taste.
Oh.
And when that was made, that would have been the height of bad taste.
It's kind of Grecian, I would say.
Yeah, it's certainly in 46 and 47 there was a lot of Grecian inspired clothes once austerity measures were no longer in force, and you could use beading and sequins again.
Okay.
But the Guild put on this show called the Midnight Parade of Fashion at the Royal Albert Hall.
Okay.
In October 46. And the press reception to it is just fantastic, because I have not read a single positive review of it. They hated it, but it was because it was sequins, it was beads, it was feathers, it was fur.
See, if that was in Paris, they were like, yeah.
Well, this was the thing. It was very Parisian inspired, but the British fashion industry wanted to try and put across as being something different to Paris, and because it had that Parisian vibe, they were like, no. Don't like it.
Thank you very much, Liz, and thank you for filling our minds full of very useful knowledge, because the thing is you can find information on this, but it's very hard, and unless you look at Liz's blog, which we will link again in the bio below, I couldn't find too much information on CC41 and the dinner plate label.
There's not a lot. There's one book. It's called CC41 Utility Clothing.
If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe, and thank you very much, Liz, for coming and doing this, and thank you. Bye.